Hey everybody, welcome back. In this movie, we're going to do a JavaScript overview. If you're totally new to JavaScript, this will be a great place to start. And even if you don't know what it is, still you're in the right place. Basically, up to this point, in a lot of the tutorials that we've done, we've talked about HTML5 and CSS3 and how to bring those together. And you know what we have is with HTML5 is a structure for building our document, and with CSS3 ways of styling this. And you know both these are usable, and we've talked a lot about those. But what we're missing so far is a third element, which is typically known as JavaScript. And what JavaScript will do for you is it begins to add a level of interactivity with your web page. And I'm going to kind of explain this as we go along in this movie. Typically, JavaScript, what you need to know is it's a scripting language, so it's an actual code, and it runs client side. And what does that mean? Client side means it is pushed through the browser. It is not run on the server, so to speak. But what it's going to do is put the script in your HTML code, and then the browser actually renders that. There's a big downside to this, unfortunately, because all browsers will tend to handle this a little bit differently. And in the last 7 to 10 years or so, we've seen kind of this emergence of technologies that people are doing where they're creating these JavaScript libraries. And I'm on one of the jQuery pages right now, and that's what jQuery is. jQuery is a library of JavaScript actions that you can call if you include that library into your document. So it's kind of like when we talked about 960.js. That was a CSS library that you can basically make commands to and kind of incorporate into your work. And what these are is JavaScript libraries. And there's several of them. There's Scriptaculous, there's jQuery, which we're looking at now. There's also MooTools. jQuery is kind of the one that I prefer to use. They're all a little bit different. They all do different things, and they're all very similar too. So if you needed to move between them, you could do so. I'm not going to go into the others at this point. We're just going to be dealing with jQuery. So what does it do? Well, we're on one of the jQuery. This is actually the jQuery UI. This is a demo page, and I'm basically going to click on one of these. Let's look at draggable. And a draggable is kind of a defined method here that we can use in our own code. And you know, you see this little box that says drag me around, and when I click and drag, I can, sure enough, drag that div around on the page. So already you're seeing interactivity that we didn't see before just with straight up HTML and CSS. There's also droppable. So if I wanted to, you can drag this box and drop it here, and there's a confirmation that it indeed dropped once it's dropped onto that box. So what you're starting to see here is web pages that behave more like software or applications, which is really quite a powerful thing. There's also resizable. So if you wanted to kind of create a window that you can resize, that's fine. There's also some widgets that are prepackaged down here. And let's look at the accordion example. And basically the accordion example, this is great for like a frequently asked questions page on a website or something like this, where you've got to organize a lot of content into something that's more digestible. You can see that we have section 1 open, and I can open one of these other sections to open the accordion. This is really easy just to basically drop into your code to have this automate, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Another one you see a lot, this date picker. You'll see this like if you are on a hotel website, you're trying to book a reservation or look at an airline, something like that. Basically, when I click in this form field next to date, it pops open a little preconceived here date picker, and I can go pick a date and select the date, and it drops it into the box automatically. And what's really cool is in jQuery, this is the jQuery UI version, and we'll get into this later, but a lot of these are pre-built, so you just have to call the date picker, and it works. Very easy, saves you a lot of time, really, really awesome. Also down here, you can see there's effects, and let's look at add class. Basically gives me a little div with some Greek text in it. When I say run the effect, it's going to change the class. And you can see that it changed the letter spacing, it changed the size, everything. I can go in here and toggle a class. These can be handy in different uses, but what I want you to really note from this is that you can start to control CSS items in here. You can see that there's rounded corners on this, things like that. And you know, we've talked about with CSS3, because it's so new, some of the browser support is a little dodgy here and there. For instance, Internet Explorer has a hard time with border radius. We talked about that in the last couple movies, and this is a way you can correct that to, you know, work kind of cross-platform. It's a little bit of a band-aid right now, but it does work. Anyway, so those are some of the things you can do. Let's look at this in practice here. We'll go back. We've looked at this before. This is the apple.com/HTML5 example where they're, you know, toting their commitment to HTML5, and they've got some demos in here. For instance, this typography, I can click this, and it gives me a little mini application here, and you know, everything's live. I can use this slider and change the size of the text. I can change the font on the fly. All this is done with some kind of JavaScript library where we're calling JavaScript functions on our HTML and CSS3 to change styles of things. And a big benefit of this is the browser support is much better because, people who have worked on these open source, libraries and frameworks have kind of hashed out all those bugs for you. There's still a little bit of testing to do, but it's a lot different than it used to be. Show you another example here. Let's go back. We've looked at both these before. Here's a gallery too. This one's really fancy because what it'll do, and then there's a variety of galleries you can choose, is, when I click on various elements or create an event to do something, like for instance, when I click this next button, it brings the next image up, moves everything over, blurs the ones in the back, brings the one in the foreground. So there's a lot of commands that go on. And these are all done with JavaScript. And this really adds an element of interactivity to your web design and your web pages that, you can't get with just straight up HTML or HTML5 even, and CSS in all its flavors. So anyway, so that's what we're going to be dealing with JavaScript. I will warn you now that it is more like real code, whereas HTML5 and CSS are really HTML5 is a markup, and cascading style sheets are just that. They're style sheets. And this is a real code. So if you're not used to coding before, we're going to start real slow, and we're going to kind of get our feet wet and get into this. And I think it's really important as I go through these to understand that I will be taking these in very small bite-sized chunks. I will try not to inundate you with too much information. I'd rather do more movies, and that way you could go back and refer to one, in the sequence if you need to. So anyway, that's just a little bit about what this scripting can do. And basically, remember that it's executed from the browser. So, the browser's going to dish up the HTML code, or the server actually sends the browser all the code, and then it puts it all together and then brings the script in last and adds that element of interactivity to things. So anyway, we're going to move on. In the next movie, we're going to get our feet wet first with just some basic JavaScript. So I will see you in the next shot here.